Do you think it's the influence of the TV show Parks and Rec, which you may remember? They hated libraries. It was librarians were the enemy.
I actually never saw Parks and Rec, so I didn't realize that, but I know that was a popular show in publishing circles, so maybe there was some influence there.
I mean, maybe. It was one of the best ongoing gags, but now I'm a little worried you can't joke about that.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Ellie Blue, the vice president of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we welcome back return guest Guy LeCharles Gonzalez of many expertises, but specifically today to address what is going on with this multi-pronged onslaught against libraries.
So when I was at Library Journal, we had a research initiative called Patron Profiles. That was one of the early attempts to be like, hey, let's really dig into what's happening with libraries. How do book borrowers interact with books? What do they purchase? And our findings back then matched every subsequent study. Library borrowers also buy books, but they're really avid readers. So they read more than the average reader. They borrow the ones that, you could never really pin down the decision-making process between what they would buy versus what they would borrow. But some early indications were discovery was a big part. Like, I don't know this Joe guy. I'm going to read his book through the library. Hey, that's pretty good. Joe's got 12 other books. I really like them and want to own them. Now I'm a Joe buyer as opposed to a Joe borrower. Conversely, I didn't like that book that much. Okay, you still got paid for it from the library.
Yeah.
You just didn't turn him into a reader. But what you also didn't do was go find it on a pirate site and you got no revenue from it.
Yep.
So fast forward 15 years, there's periodically been other studies. Pew does theirs. What we did at Panorama was an attempt to, I was conscious of, books always get talked about in a vacuum, as if book readers don't do anything else.
Yeah.
If you're a book lover, you don't watch TV, you don't read the news, you don't play games. Exactly. What is that thing? So what we attempted to do was broaden the scope in that study to be like, okay, we want to measure book activity and all the traditional stuff, but we also want to measure it against other media consumption. And in doing that, I put together this multi-industry coalition, including the Authors Guild, and Mary herself was on this advisory board. And my goal with that, because one thing I always saw was, depending on the source of the research, it became easy to dismiss it. Oh, Library Journal did it. Of course it's pro-library. Right. Ignore it.
Right.
So that was my other objective, was like, if I get the right people involved, none of y'all can dismiss this when it's done because you all participated in the development.
We built this software from scratch to solve our own problems starting in 2001.
It's not only the reason for our survival, but the reason we've been a Publishers Weekly fastest growing publisher 3 years in a row.
Now we want to share it with you.
Join Working Lit and get back the agency to understand your publishing business, market and sell your books, and painlessly pay royalties.
Working Lit. Doing the math for publishers.
Visit workinglit.com to give it a try.
Getting free. Academics with a real academic product, no consumer study is going through any kind of IRB process, any questions of ethics or anything like that. They're usually bare minimum decent methodology, and then they throw it out there to a random online audience, and then cherry pick the findings to tell the story they want. So my goal with that was to avoid all that. So getting that participation, we had a lot of good back and forth over the development of the survey. There were a lot of, I won't name names for this part, but there were a lot of interesting validations of book stereotype. There was one person on the board who definitely was that book stereotype. What is TV? What are games? The idea that immersive games exist that told stories as well or even better than most books blew that person's mind. No way. Very proud that they didn't let their kids play games until they were 21. That was one of the representatives of it, but also a good example of why I wanted this study to be more than books.
Yeah.
And so that study was completed. Dr. Norda and Behrens completed it, did their findings, and basically came out with validation of past studies. Library buyers, avid readers, also buy books, Discovery Channel, but finally it was from a research that was cross-industry and got pretty good coverage. And unfortunately, Panorama kind of fizzled away. I hoped BISG would pick up that initiative, or maybe even IBPA. Ultimately, ALA picked it up. So it did what I didn't want to happen. It became a library study again. Still really good data, but then became easy for the industry to continue to ignore. So we had this one little moment in 2020, 2021 of some solid cross-industry participation. And my hope was like, hey, if we did it here, let's keep doing it. Let's find ways to find that common ground that we can agree on, build some research, and then turn that into a longitudinal study. And that's the biggest flaw of this Authors Guild study. I don't know if you want to jump to that, but that to me was the final, that was the last shoe, that was the other shoe dropping. AAP, James Patterson, Authors Guild loves doing these bullshit surveys that authors, they're so aggrieved, they don't make money anymore. And they ignore every factor that is they ignore all the obvious factors. Those authors 20 years ago that used to make money writing, they had other non-book revenue sources to write and get paid for, like magazines. You can't make money writing for magazines the way you could 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Even licensing, the serial rights, the magazines that would take the first chapter, the excerpt or something, that is a rarity these days, but that was a big source of revenue back then. So they ignore all that, and the sources that do exist and still pay less. So they always ignore all that. They ignore the fact that there's more books being published. So there's a lot more, everybody knows, the bestsellers of yesteryear that sold 50,000 copies are now the bestsellers that sell 10,000.
Our industry is run by billionaires and conglomerates.
At Microcosm, we wanted the freedom to independently sell our books, easily pay royalties, manage our inventory, and understand our business all in one place.
That's why we've been using our own software since 2001.
Now, we want to share it with you.
Working Lit is the only business success software that is created and owned 100% by publishers for publishers.
Join Working Lit and get the agency you need to help your business grow.
Visit workinglit.com to try it for free.
They still get that bestseller subtitle on their cover, but they're not selling the way they used to.
Yep.
Has nothing to do with libraries, has nothing to do with piracy. That is publishers, and you guys realized this last year, that is publishers kind of creating their own problem, continuing to publish at a volume that the market cannot sustain.
Yeah.
So then you get, hey, readers aren't, everybody talks about the declining literacy. People are reading less, but we're publishing more and more books, and more backlist is more easily accessible than it ever was. All the obvious reasons are there, but Authors Guild continues to want to attack ebooks. What was interesting about this one is they did it last year. So the survey was fielded from October to November 2025. It's a very small snapshot. The methodology I describe as the bare minimum for a kind of legitimate study. They checked the basic boxes, but didn't click advanced settings and actually make it more rigorous. So the findings are kind of as a snapshot, all right, draw from that whatever you'd like to, but it's not really meaningful data. But as Jane Friedman pointed out, there's no historical baseline. They've had, if Authors Guild was really into this, after the immersive study with Panorama, they could have been like, hey, we like this longitudinal idea. Panorama's not going to do it. We're going to do it. Instead, they continue to invest in these little one-off snapshots. But a study as small as theirs that finished in November suddenly gets released in June, 6 months later. Come on. It does not take that, especially because they didn't do it themselves. They worked with an established, Codex has been in the industry for a long time. I don't buy that it took them 6 months to turn this around. So the timing of it is also really suspect. especially right after James Patterson comes out of left field, champion of indie bookstores and school libraries, not as well known for his public library support, coming out of left field. And again, parody. So AAP told the lie of trying to diminish the budget challenge by saying, oh, ebooks are like 3% of the operations budget. Operations budget has nothing to do with collections. It's the collections budget that's being, nobody's buying more ebook. People are laying off librarians, but that's an operations budget challenge. That's got nothing to do with the expense of ebooks. But the libraries are reporting 30 to 50% of their overall collections budget are going to ebooks. But AAP very purposely chose the operations budget to minimize. 3%. What's the big deal? Why are you complaining? A blatant lie with data. They're not wrong. It's a true, but it's irrelevant. It's not the actual point. And then Patterson parroted a version of that, but also these bills are about states mandating and controlling, basically Republican talking points like government control, which also the bills are not attempting to do. They're just like, hey, let's create a negotiation process. Like, that shouldn't be controversial.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at Microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
And here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.